I'm going to do example 3 from section 1.3 Excel homework problem using solver. And this problem says that we want to first name our sheet Excel 3. So I'm going to double click down here, Excel number 3. And then it says we have a function P of Q is equal to this expression here, and that tells us that the price per item in dollars. So this function, P of Q, will give us an output of the price per item in dollars, and Q is the number of items sold, or the input. All right, so it says create an input-output table, and I want my Q values to go from negative 180 to 540. So I'm going to say Q, and I'm going to say that that represents number of items sold. All right. And let me wrap that text here because, well, I'll make it bigger here because I don't have enough room here. Okay. And then P of Q gives us an output, and that's price per item. So when you're doing these sort of things, it's important if you can recognize what the input is and what the output is, and that should help you to answer some of these questions. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to make that justified on the top. Okay. So I'm going to start with negative 180. And notice I don't have to go by an increment of 1. That would give me a pretty big table. So I'm going to say, I'm going to go increment of 50. So I'll do negative 130. Okay. And this pattern, a difference of 50, if I drag this down, oops. 80, 30. Okay. If I use the fill handle and I pull it down, I want to make sure this goes to 390. At least. Okay, so I went to 420. All right. So now if I know price per item is equal to this function here, negative 1.23 times Q. So this cell is equal to negative 1.23 times Q, which is in column A, plus 439.63. All right. And then I can copy that down as well. And then it wants us to have the correct variables, which I did, items sold, price per item. All right, so that's the contextual thing. So now it says add a smooth line graph. So to add a smooth line graph, I just want to highlight my table of values here that I want to graph, and I'm going to insert. And we're always using this scatter plot graph. Some people have been using this line graph. We want to use this scatter plot graph, and we want to choose the smooth lines. You see, if you hover over it, it gives you the description. So I'm going to use a smooth line graph. And we can see here that it's a linear function. And let me just make this bigger. I'm going to move this over here. Okay, so it's a linear function, and there we go. So now it says within my table. Okay, some people are doing some of these calculations outside of the table. We always want to be working within the table. And it says use Excel to find or solve for the answer that would finish the following sentence. When they charge blank dollars per item, then they will sell 120 items. Well, items sold is in column A. And so I want that to be equal to 120. And I can see here I have that right in my table. So when they charge $292.03, I'm going to sell 120 items. So I need to highlight that in yellow. Didn't really have to do anything there but if I didn't have 120 in my table here, I would find the cell closest to, let's say this was 125 here. I would come down my input column and I would find the cell closest to 120 and I would just enter it because 120 is the input. So I can always just enter that and then Excel will calculate the output value. So again, now here it says within my table, use Excel to answer the sentence, when they charge $63 per item, then they will sell blank items. So I want to find how many items that they sold. All right. So I want to solve for the input when the output or the price is $63. So I'm going to come down here. Here's my price. That's my output. They gave me an output of $63 per item. So when I'm given an output, I use solver to solve for the input. What I do is I find the value closest to the output. So closest to 63 is going to be, I don't know, 107 or 46, this 46 level. I'm going to use this cell. So what I can do then is I can use solver. Solver says I've used data, solver, and what I want to do, my objective is that I want to set this cell B11. I want to force it to equal a value of $63. And then I want to put that result right next to it because that result right next to it will tell me the number of items that I can sell. I always need to uncheck this box here and then I click solve. And you can see here what it's done is it's forced the output to equal $63 and it's going to give me the input that goes along with that. And so let me just make that green. Okay, and I'm also going to format this as well so that I just have a number format, and I'm going to make it 2 decimal places. So now it shows exactly $63 per item when I sell 306 items. All right. Then it says within my table again. So I don't want to go at the bottom of my table. It says use Excel to identify the vertical interslope in blue. So the vertical intercept is where does it go through the vertical axis? So I can see it's actually up here somewhere, right? Whenever I have a vertical intercept, it's the place where x equals 0. Where does it go through the y-axis? So I want to look at my table. I say, well, I need an input of 0. So I'm going to find within my table, I don't have a 0 in my table, but I'm going to find the input cell closest to 0. In my case, that would be 20. And I'm just going to type an input of 0, and it's going to tell me, you can see it tracks right here to about 439. That is where my vertical intercept is. When the input is 0, I get an output of 439, or my y-intercept. And then lastly, it says within my table, identify the horizontal intercept. Horizontal intercept. So the horizontal intercept is where it goes through the x-axis. So here, whenever a function goes through the x-axis, my y value or my output value is 0. So when I'm given an output value, I can use solver to solve for the input. So here's my output column, price per item. I want to go down to the output that's closest to 0. That's -15. So because I know the output has to equal 0, I can use solver. Data, solver. I want to force cell B13. I want to make sure that's within my objective. I want to force it to a value of 0. And I want to put the result right in the input column right next to it in A13. And I solve. Now, when I get a 0 value, it usually shows it like this. This is exponential scientific notation or exponential notation. So this really means 1.547 times 10 to the negative 5, which is a really small number. If I format this, and I'm on a Mac, and I just did Control plus or Command plus, and it will bring up the format menu. That's a shortcut. And so now I've formatted that, and I'm going to color it red. All right, so those are the three pieces. If I go to the last part, it said make a text box near my table and graph, and I want to complete a sentence that gives the real world contextual domain for this function. So first off, some people are not entering text boxes. Let me make this bigger so I can see all my icons. So here's my text box here. All right, we use text boxes if we want to put sort of commentary in a graph, because then it doesn't mess with columns or rows. If we type something in with that bleeds over between different, if it's too wide or too fat. Okay, so the real world contextual domain. So the domain goes with the input values. So if my input values are number of items sold, mathematically I can put in, this is a linear function, I can put in negatives, positive, I can put any number. But contextually, if my input represents items sold, I can't sell negative items. So contextually, my domain is 0 items sold to, well, as I come down here, when I get up to 357 items sold, the price per item is 0. I would never sell more items because I wouldn't price my item at a negative value. So my domain, my input is going to go up to 357 items sold. That's my contextual domain. And now if I put in a complete sentence, contextual meaning of the vertical intercept. Okay, so my vertical intercept is right here. That's in blue. And that says, whoops. That says when, okay, 0 items are sold, the price per item is $439.63. If I want to say that kind of a little bit more fluently, I can say when the price of the item is $439.63, I sell 0 items. And then if I come down here and I talk about my horizontal intercept, I can say when the price of the item is $0, right? Here's $0. That represents price per item. I sell 357 items. Okay, that's my video tutorial.